Everyone, and welcome to a Chabura Sunday special. Today we have our Talmidim taking over, specifically me today. In Chabura news, we have today we just launched 3 new Musar books. Very exciting. We have A Choice of Pearls, Mifchar Peninim. We have A Cure for Sorrow, Tzari Hayagon, and we have Foundation of Fear, Yesod Ha'ira. All of them by medieval Sephardi authors, and all available for sale. You can check out our website or check out our chats, and also Bezrat Hashem, I'll post after the link so everyone can get their copy. So with that, we'll jump into our presentation today. I'll start off by thanking the Chabura for the opportunity, thanking Rabbi Dweck, thanking Sina for always pushing me to present, and thanking all my friends who helped me prepare for this. I'll also put out before that I'm not an expert in anything, so this is just a friends sharing with one another, and I hope that can get your peer review on this idea that I want to share. Also, this shiur is the Luni Shmat, my grandfather, Yitzhak Bar Chana, and also in merit of all of our soldiers. May they be protected and safe throughout it all. Okay, so today, what I wanted to focus on is the famous, the very big, popular, almost cliched problem of what happens when Western values, when our Western values that we hold so near and dear to our heart, confront Torah principles, when our sensibilities clash with what the halakha, what our forefathers how they behaved, what the halakha condones, what our institutions permit, and the values, the Western values that we have become so accepting of. So this conversation always happens whenever we go through our yearly cycle of reading the Torah. We have every time there's a topic that comes up that's a little bit contrary to what we're very much feel very strongly about. There's going to be the conversations about this. So today I wanted to share an approach forward on how to deal with this. So let me share my screen. Let's share. Can everyone see? Perfect. Okay. So the case study that I'm going to use, we're going to try to bring forward a general approach, and then we're going to apply it to 2 specific cases, and to polygamy. So generally, when we are discussing these issues, a few approaches tend to come up. The first one is the fundamentalist approach, right? So we tend to get this with people who say, listen, the Torah permits it. Sorry about that. It seemed to fail. Let's restart that. Okay. Okay, we're back. The fundamentalist approach tends to be very highly textual. It draws its morality directly from the text. It says, listen, our halakha permits, our halakha allows for polygamy. Our halakha allows for all of these things. So it is permitted, right? Clearly it is allowed. And it is we who must shift our Western sensibility. It is we who must change how we think about these issues. Right. And now, granted, they sort of have the luxury of galut to cover themselves up because they don't have to really walk around in Miami Beach, Florida with 5 wives and really to put their values and to challenge it with our modern sensibilities. They can sort of just speak this. But at the end of the day, this is the approach they take. And to be honest, this is a very strong approach. It's very sleek, to the point. The text allows it. The text allows it. The apologetic approach you tend to find a lot, even though it's less of a serious approach, is sort of a middle ground. And what it does is it's sort of, I call it the shiny key approach. The shiny key approach is, look, we have this problem with this institution, but look how revolutionary we are. Meaning they point at something that fits with our Western values a little bit better, a little bit more. So when they talk about slavery, they'll when they talk about slavery, they'll say, look, yeah, okay, it was bad, but then they immediately focus on, but look how well we treated them. Look how good we were. Look how revolutionary institution was where, yeah, our structure, the biblical structure of marriage might fly in the face of Western sensibilities, but we're revolutionary. Look how well we treat our women. And all of that is true considering the state of reality in a first century society, the Torah really is revolutionary. At the same time, it's sort of, they still don't address the issue at hand. They sort of just focus on nicer, better things. They always, when they talk about slavery, they'll throw in the line of Amru kol hakoneh eved ivri kekoneh adon latzmo, right? They'll throw, which is true. Anyone who acquires a slave is as if he's acquiring a master to himself. Look, it's because we treat them so well. But still, it doesn't address the issue at hand. Now, the opposite of the fundamentalist approach, you have the rationalist approach. Or by the way, I categorize them, so you can disagree with these categorizations. But these are the general approaches that I was getting to this problem. The rationalist approach says, listen, yes, these are problematic institutions, these are problematic values, but we have to appreciate the historical context within which the Torah was given. And this is correct. The Torah was given to a first century society, to a society that is very different than ours. And Torah dibra b'lshon bnei adam. It spoke to those people. So they view, so while they emphasize the historical considerations, they emphasize those historical considerations, they then go to the next step and say, and therefore these institutions are just, we can cut them off, meaning they are nothing more than vestiges of an evolutionary, of a moral evolutionary development. So you find this a lot when, for example, with slavery. Slavery was necessary back then, but it really was trying to wean us out of that, and therefore it's fundamentally still evil and bad, and it's just trying to move us away from it. They do this with korbanot, right? Korbanot is presented as very gory and pagan and bloody and very primitive, and therefore it was given to a pagan primitive society that needed that, right? That's what they use. The Moreh Nevuchim in the third chelik, when Harambam presents over there, he says, listen, we're dealing with a group of people that left Egypt right now. They are pagan worshippers for hundreds and hundreds of years. What do you expect them to do? To just give up pagan worship? Therefore, we needed to give them korbanot and to wean them off of those behaviors. So they say, look, yes, the Torah is these institutions and these modes of behavior are problematic, but they were just necessary evil. Now, the question on both of these approaches is, number one, is for the fundamentalist, is it always we with the problem? Meaning, is it always humanity with our evolving sensibility at fault? Where does our moral intuition fit into the consideration? Is the fact that, listen, we have a development, we have a moral evolution. Is that always bad? Is it always the Torah that stands still and we always have to what's it called, to bring back our historical conditions, meaning our historical sensibilities, to back to where the Torah sees it? And the second question is, on the rationalistic approach, is that, so practically speaking, does our Torah condone evil? They're coming very, very close, if you notice, to the Rambam's ninth Ikar about the immutability of the Torah, that the Torah is eternal, that the principles are everlasting. They come very close to violating that because essentially all of Sefer Vayikra is out for them. But they say, no, it's not that it's out, it's just that it doesn't apply anymore. That's fine, you can say that, but fundamentally, is all of Sefer Vayikra evil? Is all of Sefer Vayikra problematic? Essentially, is it an issue? So these approaches have some difficulty to them. They have some strengths, but they have some difficulty, and we need to address them. So I'm suggesting an approach forward based on these principles. And I'm going to state these principles first, and then we're going to synthesize and apply them. So the first of these principles is that the Torah speaks to man, Torah dibra b'lshon bnei adam, and was given to the generation which received it. The text has a cultural and historical context. And this is correct. The rationalists are correct in pointing out and emphasizing the historical conditions that the Torah was given in. This is a fact. With that said, the Torah is an eternal covenant, not bound by time, highly relevant to all, and to be used by all generations. So while we recognize that the Torah as a document was given to a society very different than ours, we appreciate the fact and we recognize that the Torah was also given to us in 2024, and it must have an application for us in 2024. That's how it's meant to be. It's meant to be a berit with all of Knesset Israel. The third principle is that while the Torah is eternal, so this is really where this approach is basing itself on, is that while the Torah is eternal and its principles are immutable, their application will manifest differently in each generation. So what we're going to do is we're going to be mechalek, we're going to distinguish between principles of Torah on one hand, which are eternal and immutable, and their application, which is going to manifest differently. And finally, our world is evolving with Hashem taking his world towards perfection. So what we recognize with this evolution of morality, with this evolution of our historical conditions, is that there's an evolution, is that God is taking his world towards a certain direction. So those are the principles that we're going to apply to this problem. So I believe it was in the 1970s, Abraham Maslow, he was a very famous social psychologist. So he laid out, I think, in a paper called The Theories of Motivation, he put out his conceptualization of the hierarchy of needs, a structure, a theory of how man sets out his drives, his needs, his motivations, how he's directed, uh, um, going after what he goes after, his drives. So he laid out 5 steps, and he said man first focuses on the most important thing, which is physiological needs: food, shelter, security. He moves on to security, to safety. He moves on then to love and belonging, to intimacy, to building relationships. Then he can go to esteem, and finally self-actualization, which is becoming all that which you can become, this self-fulfilled state, this high enlightened state. And the principle of Maslow's needs, of hierarchies of needs, is a very simple one, which is that before you can focus on your place in the universe and your relationship between Knesset Israel and God and Hashgacha Pratit, you first need to have food, which is a very intuitive, a very intuitive principle. You can't focus on high refined states. You can't be a Hasid when you don't have anything to eat or you're being attacked on the streets. You need to build on top layer by layer by layer, and then you can finally reach self-actualization. So what I'm suggesting is that this way of looking at it, at the individual, how the individual sets about his life, should not only be seen on the individual level, but also globally. Also, how humanity develops. Humanity starts off at a very raw, primal state of trying to secure physiological needs. And as we go, each generation moves closer up the levels, ideally, we hope, towards self-actualizations, towards a state of what we in our lingo call Mashiach. That's how we categorize it, as Mashiach. Rambam in Hilchot Melachim and Milchamot, the final he says his final halacha. He says in that era there'll be neither famine or war, envy or competition, for good will flow in abundance, and all the delights will be freely available as dust. The occupation of the entire world will be solely to know God. Therefore, the Jews will be great sages and know the hidden matters, grasping the knowledge of their Creator according to the full extent of human potential. As Ishaya 11:9 states, the world will be filled with knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. So, this state of Mashiach, deromanticized from how it's sort of seen as this floating, angels flying around, is that we start off beating each other on the streets and trying to secure some basic level of security. And God willing, we will find ourselves, humanity, at a state where they'll secure these needs to be able to focus, to be able to integrate and focus on Yediyat Hashem. God is taking his world towards perfection. And you can see this, by the way, today. We're getting very close at this when at 12 in the afternoon, when you can see people doing yoga classes. Thank God. we're a very far cry away from trying to secure basic security, basic needs. In Israel and Humanity, he states, what categorizes Judaism from other religions is that its progression of history places perfection not at the beginning, but at the end. This is indeed the meaning of the Messianic era that awaits, and that we define thus: faith maintained from the start for the future religious, moral, social, and material perfection of mankind, and which must have its fulfillment in the last days. So, stating basically what we're saying over here, this idea, the Maslownian approach to the individual, just on the grand scheme of things, on humanity. And this is how we should view the development of humanity. What was necessary and needed on one state, on one generation, what was the focus in one generation, and it was the appropriate focus, might shift and develop throughout the generations. The takeaway is that our world is evolving to higher states of refinement. We do not outgrow our drives and dispose of them. We integrate our needs in higher forms of refinement. And for example, one who has food security, it's inappropriate to spend all his day focusing on food, but it is equally inappropriate to dispose of gathering food. So the same approach is going to be taken for our moral development as well. So now, let's move to Torah principles and evolution. So how does our Torah principles evolve to match our conditions? So we see that there's this evolution of conditions. So how does our Torah principles, this immutable document, this seemingly immutable covenant that we have, how does it develop to match our conditions? And this is very apropos that we're speaking about this after the Moed of Shavuot. This is the expression of our great Sinai partnership with God. We have a Torah Sheba'al Peh and a Torah Shebichtav. The Torah Shebichtav provides the immutable, the steady, the unchanging text, that which is consistent, the guideposts that take us forward, that provide us that security and stability. And at the same time, we have the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that's our domain. And that provides us the flexibility to understand and implement the text into diverse conditions. It is our responsibility as part of this partnership to take the principles of Torah and apply them in a generationally sensitive manner to our conditions today, to match where we are at. We must take the Torah, we must take our covenant with God and move up the steps with them as we are confronting more and more conditions. This is expressed by the Ran. So in responding to what the fundamentalist approach might respond and say, no, the Torah is perfect as is, and the Torah's principles are immutable and can never be applied. The Ran clearly states this. So he's talking about what happens if we would just apply the Torah principles to judicial legislation, to dealing with criminals. He says, but if lawbreakers were punished in this context alone, meaning just purely by the text, the structure of society will break down completely. This is the Ran. This is not some apologist, modern day apologist. He's stating to you directly that our responsibility is to take the principles of the criminal justice system that the Torah lays out in the text and apply it to the given conditions. And we see this clearly that that's what Chazal dealt with. They were brilliant at understanding the psychology, the sociology, the geopolitical, the socioeconomic conditions of the time they were in, and applied Torah to it to be very cutting edge. And that is our responsibility. So basically, what we're being mechalek over here is between the principles of Torah and the applications of Torah. So now let's jump into the case study. Let's jump into slavery. So slavery, we in the West, and rightfully so, have completely rejected. Slavery is considered today as one of the greatest sins in our history. And let's put this out before we jump into it. Let's put this out first, is that Western slavery was very morally reprehensible. American slavery, as speaking from an American context, is a complete immoral crime. It was based on racism. It was based on it was sexually abusive. It was violent. It was aggressive. It was dehumanizing. So let's first establish that before we jump into the analyzation of it. Is that Western slavery was completely rife with its moral problems. But our Torah condones it, meaning not Western slavery, but our Torah allows for slavery. We can flip it all we want, but at the end of the day, the Torah allows for slavery. The Torah speaks of the institution of slavery. So how are we meant to confront that? How are we, with our Western sensibilities, meant to confront that? What are we meant to do? Are we meant to just apologize for it and push it aside? Are we meant to rationalize it and say, listen, it was evil and it was just a necessary evil, which then makes the Torah condone evil institutions? Or as the fundamentalists say, is it actually just totally permitted and we don't need to respond to it because we're correct? So Chacham Shama, in his book Recalling the Covenant, so when he deals with slavery, he says, in dealing with the topic of slavery in the Torah, it is important to bear certain basic considerations in mind. In the subsistence economy of the ancient Near East, slavery was an important part of the solution to the ever-present danger of death and chronic illness due to deprivation of food and shelter. It also was a safeguard against many turning to crime. Neither government nor community were sufficiently advanced in order to care for the less capable members of society. It is difficult to imagine how society of that time could have functioned beneficially for its inhabitants without it. So what Chacham Shama is, first off, what he's doing is taking a historical consideration in mind. What he's saying correctly, what he's pointing out, is that without slavery, societies would have fallen apart. There was no way to deal with people who are incapable of taking care of themselves. Now, at the same time, looking at our historical conditions today, we don't need slavery. We're not dealing with trying to save it. We have food security. We don't need slavery. If the modern state of Israel today would reconstitute the slave trade, it would be very immoral and counter to the development of humanity. So what is the Torah trying to do? So with this approach, what we should be doing is identifying what the principle is, what the Torah is trying to teach us in principle, and then apply it generationally. So what the Torah principle is that there are people among us who cannot and are not able to express free will or agency as much as everyone else for whatever reason, whether it be physical, whether it be mental incapability, economic, whatever the conditions are, there are going to be people among us who are not able to take care of themselves with the full level of free agency that we will provide everyone. And we need to take care of them. We need on some level to curb their free will, to curb their ability to act as self-agents in society for their sake of their will. Obviously, it's dangerous. I'm not saying this is not a dangerous notion because this was applied. I'm acting for your benefit. That was a very dangerous notion. But at the same time, what the Torah is trying to teach us is this idea is that not everyone can have equal levels of free agency. That's the principle. Now, how is that going to apply? So in the first century, where people are starving on the streets, chattel slavery was how it was applied, and that would have been fine. Dehumanizing is terrible, and that's what, if you read Rambam, he talks about how they used to have slaves in his day, but he says, but these are the moral ways you should treat them. Today, having chattel slavery would be completely immoral. The principle still stands. There's people, children, the mentally ill, chronically homeless, right? We're going to have to find applications. But there's people that slavery will apply for, meaning I'm not saying slavery as in put them into chattel slavery, but the principle still stands. The application is going to be very, very different to how it was back then. Now, moving to polygamy. So in polygamy, Chacham Shama again for the win, he writes, despite being generally understood today as detrimental to women's standing, polygamy was permitted in the Torah. It was too deeply rooted in the ancient society and served too important a societal function to have been banned at that time. So again, immediately what he does is he considers the historical considerations, the historical moment within which the Torah is being given, and he says, listen, it was the way that it was applied back then is completely necessary. Now today, in our reality today, where we're not scraping for food, where we have financial stability for the most part, where we don't have to engage in polygamy, engaging in polygamy would be immoral. It would be inappropriate for someone in the West today to have multiple wives. Because when you have the ability, when you have the opportunity to focus on exclusivity, on love, and self-actualization, and the building a home with one woman, why would you take 17? Why would you take 5? It might have been necessary back then, and a good thing back then. But today, the application of polygamy as with a first century application would be inappropriate. At the same time, the principle of polygamy still stands. Unlike the rationalists who then say, therefore, it was a necessary evil, and it's evil in reality. No, it's not evil. What the Torah is trying to tell you is that there is a relationship that could work. That could work. It's going to be very different than our relationship. It might not lead to the same levels of self-actualization, but under certain considerations and certain conditions, such as everyone is starving, this is a viable and good relationship to have. That's what the Torah is trying to teach us. We're not meant to just bend the knee to every Western idea that comes up, to every new value that comes up, and we have to say, no, in reality, it's always immoral. No, it could work. The conditions today don't require us to have to do that. So why would you do that? And that would be immoral. Not related directly to polygamy, but when it comes, the Talmud says that mitzvah shelo yekadesh bito keshehi ktana ad shetekadil v'tomar beploni ani rotza. So our Torah allows for marriage between minors, for minors. We're able, with the consent of the parents, to allow for that marriage to occur. In the West today, that is not only inappropriate but criminal. Now, the Talmud still states and says, listen, it is a mitzvah, even though it is permitted halachically, even though the Torah allows for it, it is not wise. It is a mitzvah. It is a more appropriate. Even back then, it was already where the reality was shifting to be a mitzvah that a person should not marry off his daughter while she's a minor and let her grow to become an adult, so then she can choose on her own who she wants to marry. That's the mitzvah. That's what the Chazal take that and move it to that. Now, there's this beautiful so the Tosfot. So this is in the it's quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. So the Tosfot says, ויש אומרים דנוהגים בזמן הזה לקדש בנותיהן הקטנות משום שאנו בגלות ואין לנו תמיד סיפוק כדי צורכיו נדוניה, גם אנו מתי מעט ואין מוצאים תמיד זיווג הגון וכן נוהגים. So the Tosfot says, well, why do we do it? Meaning in Ashkenaz, we're marrying off minors all the time. Now, Chazal in Babylon already told us to move away from that, but we do it. So why do we do it? He says, well, we do it because we're in the galut. We don't have enough resources to supply their needs. They can't have the dowries, the nidunias as proper. Also, we're a tiny population. We don't have enough people to marry. So this is necessary. We need to marry off our daughters while they're still minors. And this is the correct application. In that time, in the Tosfot's societal, historical conditions, he's correct. He's 100% applying the principles of Torah correctly, and it is good. And what the Torah is teaching us is that there is a viable and marriage that could work with a minor. Now, is it ideal for the sake of self-actualization and self-fulfillment, as that's really the end goal of humanity? No, but it could work. So we have to be sensitive enough. Our responsibility is to take the principles of Torah and apply them in a generationally sensitive manner. Now, what comes up from this approach is that we see some form of evolution of morality. Meaning, according to what I'm saying, you guys are saying, well, doesn't that mean that there's every generation considers certain things moral while certain generations consider certain things immoral? Is that a problem in morality? There's a certain flexibility over here. And what I would like to be mechalek over here, just like we were mechalek between principles and applications, we're mechalek between truth, emet, and morality. So in the Moreh Nevuchim, the opening, Harambam makes this very clear. We'll read it in English, which is, through the intellect, man distinguishes between the true and the false. This faculty Adam possessed perfectly and completely, Adam Harish. The right and the wrong are terms employed in the science of apparent truths, morals, not in that of necessary truths. As in, it is not correct to say, in reference to the propositions, quote, the heavens are spherical, it is good, right? You don't say that that statement is good, or to declare the assertion that the earth is flat to be bad, right? But what we do say is that this one is true and the other is false. Similarly, our language expresses the idea of true and false by the terms emet and sheker, of the morally right and the morally wrong, by tov and ra. So morality is not necessarily bound to the category by the category of emet v'sheker. There's a separation. That which is moral is not necessarily emet. What every generation considers as moral is not necessarily emet. We hope that our generationally sensitive morality is tethered to the objective principles of virtue, which exist in the realm of emet v'sheker, but it's not always the case. Many generations believed certain things were tov or ra, and in reality they were flipped because they weren't properly tethered to emet v'sheker. So each generation, we hope, is aiming towards the objective virtues of truth, shalom, justice, but with different historical conditions, they will manifest in different manners. So when we're at the state of trying as a humanity, trying to solve physiological needs, that which is tov and ra is going to be differently. Throughout it all, we're trying to reach for emet v'sheker. We're all trying to fit the principles of Torah. We're all trying to fit those immutable, never moving flag posts and principles. They're going to apply differently at whatever permutation of reality we find ourselves in. Now, with that said, what ends up happening is that when we properly tether the two, when truth and morality match, beauty emerges. And the opposite is true. When truth and what is regarded as immoral don't match, chaos and ugliness emerge. And we see this, there's two instances of the flip. So we all know the famous story of Shimon and Levi. So Israel, Yaakov cut a deal with Shechem, who raped their daughter Dinah, who raped their sister Dinah. And the deal was that, listen, we'll make peace with you. You guys do Brit Milah, and we'll put our grievances aside, and we'll be in peaceful terms with you, both with you. On the third day, while they were kulam ko'avim, while they were in pain, while they were unable to fight, Shimon and Levi take their swords and wipe out the entire city. And they come back, and what does Yaakov say? What's his response? Amar Yaakov el Shimon ve'el Levi. אחרתם אותי להבישני ביושב הארץ בכנעני ובפריזי ואני מתי מספר ונאספו אליי והיכוני ונשמדתי אני וביתי. You have brought trouble on me, making me odious amongst the inhabitants of the land. Right? And they're going to come and kill us. What would our concern be? When we read this story, if we were Yaakov, what would our first response be? Our first response be, did you just literally murder out an entire city? That's immoral. What are you guys doing? You murdered an entire city? What is Yaakov concerned about? You make me look bad. It's not great PR what you guys did over here. What are you guys doing? Right? What should be the response? There should be a response is you guys committed murder. You guys are immoral. What are you guys doing? Immediately, we see the Rishonim come up, and what they explain is in reality, no. They were in Torah principle allowed to kill Shechem. The Ramban, they disagree over why they were permitted to, but what they come out and they say, listen, you were completely permitted. In Torah principle, they were justified. They were allowed to murder out the entire city of Shechem. They were all chayav mita. That's what Chazal come about and show. So what is Yaakov? So now Yaakov's response makes sense, because Yaakov is not addressing the justification for it. He says, yeah, technically you might be right, but you applied the principle inappropriately. You're not sensitive to the conditions right now. We just cut peace with them. We just made there was a breaking of trust over here. That's disgusting. You make me look disgusting amongst the nations of the world. His concern is not you guys are immoral, because they're not. They're justified. They're allowed to do what they want. But they're wrong. They're wrong because they applied the principles of what is right and what is wrong, and they misapplied it. So now it's disgusting. This is a prime example of the difference between technically what you can be doing is emet, but applied wrongly, and therefore it's disgusting. It's immoral. And the opposite is correct. We see this a lot with the fundamentalist approach, which says what the Torah says is correct, it condones, and it is we who have to shift our perspective and sensibilities, and we don't care what they say. We don't care how we're perceived. If I want to walk around Miami Beach with my 3 wives, I could, and if I want to have slaves, I could, and no one should judge me, and we don't care what they have to say. Seemingly, that's not the case. When Moshe says, ושמרתם ועשיתם כי היא חוכמתכם ובינתכם לעיני העמים אשר ישמעון את כל החוקים האלה ואמרו רק עם חכם ונבון הגוי הגדול הזה. Right? If you follow the mitzvot and you properly protect them and apply them, the rest of the nations will say, only a brilliant nation, this great wise people, this nation. The litmus test of when we apply Torah properly is when the rest of the world can see us and say, makes sense. I love it. It's beautiful. It's generationally sensitive. It fits the conditions of our times. It's beautiful. When it's not, right? What's wrong? Well, I know many people who we know many societies that apply the Torah very literally, just by the principles of the book, and they don't get this response. They don't elicit, wow, brilliant. Why? Because what Moshe is telling us is that it's not enough to just apply the principles. You have to apply the principles in a proper application. That's our responsibility, to manifest the principles of Torah in a generationally sensitive approach. So we see this also, just another example, and it's relevant to the war that we find ourselves in right now, is that when we enter into the land of Israel with Yehoshua, and they're dealing with the other kings, so they go and they capture one of the kings, and they chop off his fingers and his legs, and they display it, and they throw it on. They torture him, and we read that with our Western sensibility, and we say that's disgusting, that's terrible. But what we fail to understand is that was the appropriate application in a first century context with Yeshua of Gevurah, of a nation asserting itself, of war. That's how war was done. And how do I know that that's true? Because what does that king, who we just chopped off his fingers and feet and everything, say? He performed tziduk adin. He says, okay, I get it. I used to do the exact same thing. It makes sense. Right? He doesn't say, how dare they, these immoral people, the Jews are just wild animals. He says, no, this is the way that things are done. This is a proper application of a nation asserting itself. Now, today, if we would be chopping off fingers and toes from people and displaying them on the walls of Jerusalem, it would be inappropriate. At the same time, we don't have to bend our knees to what the West at every given moment or what every culture defines as appropriate. We have the Torah with their principles. We just have to apply it properly. And the rest of the world wants to see how we apply the Torah principles properly. So to conclude, it is our responsibility to take our Torah principles, to stay committed to them, and apply them in a generationally sensitive manner, and to bring the beauty of Torah to the rest of the nations. So that's the general approach. We have a few minutes, so I'll open to questions, comments, disagreements.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So are you saying that this approach how would this work when it comes to practical halacha changing nowadays?
Very good. So first off, I recommend Shmuley Phillips' new book, Talmud Reclaimed. He deals with this very beautifully and very extensively on halacha. When you study halacha, what you appreciate is the flexibility that Hashem granted us. In halakha is an actual law, it's a legal system, and it has the ability of developing and evolving throughout the generations. Now, with that said, it's still a legal system. It still has its principles, which are going to stand still. Homosexuality in the Torah is never going to become permitted. It's very, very clear. That is never going to change. Now, with that said, there's applications of things which might change, and we see that evolve and develop. So when we start seeing halakha as an actual legal system, then if you compare it to other legal systems, we see this evolution occurring. So it's not a full answer, but I hope that was
Thanks.
approach.
Oh, Ohad? Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
It's about the idea of morality and how Plato thought about it. So I think Plato thought of morality or ethics like mathematics, something which you discover. And I'm just wondering whether, in a sense, when we talk about the evolution of ethics, we're actually discovering something new rather than just going back to the principles we had, perhaps that's an inappropriate term, a long time ago. I mean, it's just an idea from, I don't know how much this came into the Rambam, because I don't know how much of Plato he read. I know he read a lot of Aristotle. And I know there was a difference between Aristotle and Plato when it came to his understanding of ethics.
Yeah, very good. So I'll be the first to tell you that I'm not an expert at all in philosophy.
Same here.
But I will say,
I've just read a little bit. That's, you know, a few things on the internet. So that's why I'm puzzled. I'm not.
So I will say maybe on this, and again, by the way, feel free to people disagree or bring their own positions. I would say that on some level, it's not necessarily an exploration or a discovery of morals. It's that we're seeing new applications for things that we wouldn't have ever imagined. So it's the same way that meaning in Drush, where you have Moshe Rabbeinu being in the Agadita, that he's being placed in the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Akiva, and he doesn't understand the shiur at all. He doesn't understand what's flying whatsoever, with Rabbi Akiva applying these brilliant interpretations of the Torah, and a student finally raises his hand and says, where did you get this from? And he says, oh, that's from Moshe, meaning this is halakha Moshe. So it's like a seed growing out. The seed can never really imagine how it's going to grow out and how wonderful and brilliant and into states that he would never have imagined. So on some level, our Torah, and this is the exciting thing, is that our Torah has what to say to such a wide array of situations and conditions, and we're going to sometimes see the conditions that it's applied to, and we're going to be, wow, this is an unbelievable application of Torah. I would have never seen such a ordering or structuring of it. So I hope that answers that. It's not necessarily a discovery of morals we didn't know, but it might be an application of the principles in ways that we would have never imagined.
And are the principles something which we discovered ourselves, or was something? I'm trying to understand the basis of the principles, how we came to know them. I mean,
you're saying on some level. On some level, there's the Torah. I mean, when I speak about the principles, I'm talking about Torah principles.
Yeah.
Meaning with the revelation of the Torah.
It's just I discussed this with my rabbi. He seems to me to say that in the Torah principles have been given to us, and the opposite is people making them up, making their own sort of judgments. You know, let's construct a new morality, let's indulge ourselves as the two alternatives.
So
but I'm just wondering.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering whether there's some measure to this idea that through our own sort of reflections upon the nature of things, we come to a better understanding of what is really good. I'm going back to the idea that Plato thought that you could never define what is good, which you know,
you could think about Sinai and like the kind of a potential argument of the logic of the system being kind of a combination of those things. because just as you have kind of like an idea that is a low resolution compressed representation of something more complex, you can have the whole truth in your hand, and the seed over time will evolve into a tree and delineate in ways that flow through a specific evolutionary specific trajectory. To the observer, that's a chedesh, right? But to the giver of the seed, that's all known. So both of these can be true, and that's certainly the way we think about the tree of life. That's why it's a living truth. So I feel like our system encompasses both of those things. Sorry, I just thought I'd weigh in.
No, that's helpful, Joel. That is helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, Joel. Shout out to Joel, is a good friend and a brilliant scientist, brilliant mad scientist, literally.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
The other thing, Ohad, I was interested in Maslow, and we're asked to walk in the path of righteousness, and I wonder how's that related to being self-actualization. Whether I should really be considering what I'm doing for other people rather than bothering about myself. What do you mean by self-actualization?
Can you say the question again?
Yeah.
What is meant by self-actualization?
Yeah, I was just, I feel that, as a Jew, I'm asked to walk in the path of righteousness and be part of a holy nation. And I'm not sure how that is related to Maslow's self-actualization.
I think that's a great point, Ohad. I was going to make it myself. Like, I think there's a kind of like, there's a bad fit of self-actualization and like the yoga culture as a kind of like, as a kind of way of thinking about Torah insights, because it's like a national pastime, and the revelation is the level of the nation. It's not at the level of the individual. So the individual has insights, certainly, but ultimately, like, we hear God's voice best collectively at Sinai through like a national, really, 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 really intense hobby. And that's not about our personalities as such, right? The personality definitely transforms, but that's a secondary like interface to the issue at hand. Like, the issue at hand is a relationality to Torah, instrumentalizing relationality to Torah, and that instrumentalizes our midot, right? So it's like, at no point does like this become about someone's personality, because look who's so smart. Well, we're all so smart, right? Everyone here is really, really smart. And like, it's not about like any one person's personality. It's not. So I think that the idea that like that insight is contained inside the self is a kind of like not a non, it's kind of the not the right framework. Now, you may mean that in the kind of a more culturally like less acute way. You might be talking about something else. But I think that it is problematic to think about like the idea of like becoming a perfect individual, and that being the fulcrum of transformation, right? It's not the person, it's the fulcrum of transformation. Like, that's wrong. I think that's like why we don't have a personality cult around a Yishka or a Buddha, right? Because the like, there's no personality that's going to cover this. Sorry, right? It's like a book of laws and a national pastime and a civilization and all the colors. Thank you, right? It's how you conduct your army, how you farm your land, how you have tax codes. It's everything. You play with all the colors if you have a serious moral worldview. That's so far beyond a personality, it's laughable. So the question is like, what do you mean when you talk about self-actualization?
Right. No, 100%. I do think that Judaism is revolutionary in the fact that we claim that perfection, that our relationship with God is not going to be limited to a group of people or to one person who reaches self-enlightenment, but rather we have a responsibility to bring the entire world under that. So, and this was essentially part of our rejection, and rightfully so, of Jesus, is that he comes down and says, listen, I'm the Messiah. And we all look around and we see things burning around and we say, well, this can't be. Like, you can't be the Messiah when literally the world is starving. So, and we properly rejected him. And we say, no, we're going to, as Yaakov says, I'm going to walk slowly with the children. I'll meet you there. We're going to slowly develop with the world together and reach the end, which is this state where people can, once we have all of those needs secured as a humanity, we can focus on higher, more refined states, which in the words of the Rambam, I think, and how the Rambam would frame it, would be our entire goal is Yediat Hashem, the knowledge of the knowledge of God, not only in an informational manner, but in a real relational manner. So when knowing God can happen while you're foraging and trying to find food, but it's going to be on a very limited and more primal level. It's going to be on very simple physiological need. But the more higher you grow, the level of Yediat Hashem that you can have is going to be very refined and very more sophisticated. So we're hoping to bring humanity to that state where they're not only going to be focused and distracted with Hevle Hazman, and even when they're dealing with physiological needs, yes, technically you can have Yediat Hashem, but we want to reach that state where we're free to focus directly on that and only that to its highest extent.
Yeah. Ohad, can I ask both you and Joel another question about the seed? I mean, I really like Joel's idea of the seed and the tree of life.
Yeah.
At Sinai, Joel, were we given the seed, or what were we given?
That's a great question. I think it's like oftentimes when you have a seminal idea, you already do see all of its manifold eventualities, but it takes time to make those expressed. So, the way I think about it is that essentially we are all neurons in God's brain, and that's why we can hear his voice at the same time. That's the expression of Sinai consciousness. And that's the ultimate manifest. That's the ultimate destiny of the Jewish people, is to become a yichud of a civilization, and to express godliness. And that's why I think the self-actualization thing is not a great metaphor, because how do you explain Mesiras Nefesh, which it's like we forego life, we forego food, we forego all of those things in existential circumstances at times, right? Because we're a living embodiment of Hashem's word. We're a living Sefer Torah. And the evidence of that is Mesiras Nefesh. In other words, it's inverted, right? That we are halachic, we're halachic beings first and foremost. And I think that you could get there the other way around through leisure. For sure, you can get there through through cause and effect. You can get there through massages, I guess. But ultimately, I think that these are not luxury beliefs, right? The idea is that you become a Sefer Torah. It's prediscursive to your thinking. You become a cell in a body. You recognize how with Bittul, your true place in this as a yad, and it's it isn't about the self. It's really that's really the last thing it's about. You get that too, right? We get that too, but that's not the point, right? The point isn't that we as individuals become actualized. The point is that we manifest Hashem's law, and Hashem doesn't care if we're perfect. What does he care? He doesn't care if we're perfect. He's had perfect people, so what? He needs people to be advocating who are highly imperfect, because that's good for the Shekhinah, which is different than being good for us. It's different than us having a massage or doing yoga or something.
We see this expressed very nicely in the narrative of Abraham and the Malachim, where he's literally talking to Hashem. He's seemingly reached the highest form of self-enlightenment. He is talking to God. Literally, he's talking to God. And then he says, "One second, God, I'm going to go do Chnasat Orchim. I'm going to go deal with these idol worshippers who are walking in the street and need food." And the idea over there is that what's greater than actually your self-actualization in the sense of, oh, I'm talking to God, so now I reach this nice spiritual state, is to actually act like God, meaning is to actually bring the world to a godly state, which is the greater. Great. Now that might actually have been a detriment to his personal self-enlightenment. That was a detriment to his personal self-enlightenment, but at the same time, that is a greater form. That is something you actually have to do.
That's good. I think the thing is, Ohad, I never managed to self-actualize, and I'm 74 now, so I don't want to.
I think we're going to close it for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really good.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to really learn together with this community. So,
Laila Tov, everyone.
Bye-bye.